Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Let's Talk TEFL podcast. So I'm Jackie, and joining me is Jennifer. Hey, Jennifer.
Hi, Jackie.
Teaching ESL reading. We'll start with some general tips, and then we have a few activities, and then we'll talk about how to plan a basic ESL reading lesson plan. So the first one is teaching reading is more than just these like long passages or novels or newspaper articles, something like that. So when I took the CELTA course, my tutor said that teaching writing, if a student is writing even one word on a piece of paper, that's teaching ESL writing. So I kind of applied that same thing to reading. If a student is reading, a very beginner is reading one word off a flashcard, you're teaching reading.
Yeah.
If there's a beginner who's learning what sounds the alphabet letters make, B equals ba, you're teaching reading. So get beyond thinking novels or nothing. There's a whole range of skill levels and abilities in between phonics and then kind of like fluent reading of authentic materials.
Yeah. But also just think back to your own childhood. And when you were maybe in kindergarten or first grade, you would have had books that literally had 4 words on a page that you would sort of struggle through at first. And that's where your students will start out as well. Even if they're adults, they are starting over. They may know how reading works, but if they don't know the words or they don't know the phonics, whatever, they're starting back over.
And if your students aren't proficient at reading, I know there's different theories about this and opinions about this, but my personal opinion, is that reading is the foundation of everything. So if your students aren't great at reading, and they maybe, for example, don't know all the sounds that the letters make or the sound combinations like vowels or whatever, I would definitely spend time in class getting students proficient at that. It's really difficult to teach writing, for example, or even like speaking, or it's difficult for them to go home and memorize vocabulary words if they're not proficient at reading. So it's actually so important. And I think, especially for beginners, it's worth taking time to focus on this in class, even if you think, oh, they know how to read, but do they know how to read well? I don't know. It's not always the case.
Yeah.
So definitely have a check.
They also may not be very proficient readers in their first language. There's lots of people who just never read and don't like to read, or are, reading well below their age or their grade level or whatever in their first language. So you need to remember that they will bring that over into their second language as well.
Yeah, which can be tough if students aren't great at reading in their first language. You have kind of an uphill battle to teach someone how to read in a second language if they're not great at reading in their first, but do your best. I mean, anyone can improve for sure in their English reading abilities with practice and with time and focused teaching. So, all right, the next general tip I have, when choosing a reading passage, in general, you'll want students to read the passage twice. Same with listening exercises, you'll want them to listen twice. If they can just understand every single thing upon the first go, it's probably too easy. And if it takes them like reading closely like 5 times or listening to a passage 5 times, it's too difficult for them. So in general, the first time they will read it once kind of for some general information. And then the second time can be reading for detail. So just kind of have that in the back of your mind when you're planning your lesson and keeping in mind the ability level of the students.
Exactly. Yeah. Another tip for reading, if you're doing extensive reading, especially, a tip that I thought was very handy was have your students make a fist. And as they're reading one page, count on their fingers. Like if they come to a word they don't know, hold out a finger. So if they get to all 5 fingers are out before they finish the page, that's too difficult for them.
Yeah, you want to avoid the situation where students are constantly getting out their cell phones to look up words. I mean, it's reading is good for teaching new vocabulary words, but you want to teach a few new words. You don't want every second word to be a new word, because then you'll just lose the meaning of the passage. And that's not that helpful for our students. Next one. So push students to read quickly and
Yes.
timed reading activities. So definitely give a set amount of time to accomplish a reading task. It's helpful because for many situations, actually at the workplace, if a student has to read a report in English, no boss wants them to take 3 days to read a report that should take them 2 hours to read. They're at the bus station, they need to scan quickly for what time their train is leaving to a certain destination. For English proficiency exams, they're timed exams, and it requires actually like quicker reading skills. You don't have all day to do it. And so all those situations require students to read more quickly than they might want to actually read. So it can be helpful in our classes if we focus on that as well.
Yeah, and something that I did for a timed reading activity, I did this when I was teaching at an elementary school where the students learned half the day in English and half the day in Korean. On the English half, I would give them the kind of reading passages that they would have on like a standardized test. And they would read it 3 times in a row. And I would just have a stopwatch on the overhead monitor. And when they finished reading it the first time, they would write down their time. And when everybody was done, would start over and would do that 3 times. And their goal was to have a little bit shorter time each time they read it. And then that would hopefully get them a little bit more habituated to moving their eyes a little bit more quickly across the page. And they really liked it then, like that, the whole stopwatch aspect of beating the clock, winning.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I always would say like, okay, you have 4 minutes to read and answer these questions. And I never said to students, are you done? Oh, no. Okay, you have more time. I would just say, all right, 4 minutes is up. Let's go. And the first, like few days of that class, students were like, what? I'm not done. But then later on, they were like, no, this is serious. I actually do need to read faster. So it's a bit of an adjustment, but it was like, I just never asked the question, are you done? I just was like, your time is up. Let's start with the answers. And I think it actually helped my students in the end, although it was a bit of a learning curve for them.
So the next tip from me is to choose high interest stories if possible. So especially if you have reluctant readers, if you have any sort of control over the topics, try to find out what your students are interested in. And, if there's some, like if you have a bunch of boys, then maybe something like sports or more like adventure type of thing. But just in general, mystery stories or something that could broadly be considered a mystery, where there's that kind of what happens next kind of feeling, that will help hold their interest better, especially if it is a longer text.
Yeah, for sure. Of course. Yeah. Give students a reason to read. And if the reason is like they're interested in knowing the outcome of the story, that's actually the best case scenario, I think. Yeah. All right. So let's get into some activities. So reading activities are interesting because it's like reading is kind of the activity. But we have a few ideas for things to keep in your mind, I guess. So my first activity is a classic one, extensive reading. So extensive reading is just reading something for fun, and it should be at like a slightly lower level than the student is at. So it's something they can read effortlessly. So extensive reading is amazing. It's probably like if there's the most valuable thing that students can do in class or outside of class, it's probably extensive reading. It helps with vocabulary, speaking, writing, grammar, reading. It helps in so many areas. I guess the challenge in this is having materials for the students to read, and then also motivating students to do this, especially outside of class. So if you can do it, or if it's at all feasible, definitely implement this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Even like the first 10 minutes of your class or for homework or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. My tip for your classroom library, if you have an empty suitcase, for example, when you're coming back from a holiday at home, that is a really good way to build up your classroom library with stuff that is, of general interest to your students. Like I would always stock up on like kids' mysteries, like Nate the Great and that kind of thing, like, or slightly higher than that, because I taught quite young students. Yeah, they would have time every morning before school started, they would have time to read. And then one day a week, we would have like an extra half an hour of extensive reading time, and they could read anything off the bookshelf that they wanted.
Yeah, that's kind of the key, giving students some choice in what they read. As soon as you make something mandatory to read, it's not extensive reading. It's like a chore that they have to do for the class. But if you have a variety of books at a variety of levels and it's not prescribed, then I think students are free just to read for fun and for pleasure and to find out how does the story end and look at the pictures and that kind of thing. And for adults, definitely consider picking up some graded readers. So it can be like kind of the classic stories that you may have read in high school or whatever, but then the language will be simpler. Or there's just graded readers that just have, original stories in them as well, but the language is simpler for English learners.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next idea is one of my favorites. It's making a prediction based on a picture or a headline, and then reading the text to see if this prediction is true. So it's quite simple, but it covers the aspect of giving students a reason to read. They're invested in it because they've made a prediction, and then they have to read to see if their prediction was correct or not.
Yeah, and it also increases interest because it does create that little bit of mystery. Like, oh, am I right? What is this about?
All right, so Jennifer, what is yours? You're going to talk about skimming and scanning.
Yeah, so skimming and scanning are two activities that go hand in hand, but are used for different purposes. So skimming is sort of the kind of thing where you look at the headline. You can also use the pictures to give you some clues, and it's just trying to get an overall, like an overview of the main points, the main idea, what it's generally about. And when you scan, you're looking for specific information. So for example, if you have, some target language that you want the students to circle, they might scan and look for the keywords. Or if you want them to, answer some questions, but you've given them a really short period of time to answer them, then they might also look for the keywords from the questions, that kind of thing. So scanning also, like a bus schedule, it looking at the time on your watch and then looking at the schedule and seeing, when the next bus is going to come, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And those are great activities for pushing students to read more quickly. And then what would follow that is a reading for details, or reading to look for like more specific information or to kind of understand the nuances of that passage, and even looking at some grammar or vocabulary in it, or focusing on meaning and that kind of thing. But we'll get into more details about that in our next section about how to plan an ESL speaking lesson. All right. Oh, reading. Oh, no. I actually teach ESL speaking way more and like write about it more. So it's sometimes hard for me not to say ESL speaking. And that's my website name, one of my websites, but ESL reading lessons. So the first step is that you want to set the context. So there's various ways to do this. So if your like reading passage, for example, is about a holiday gone wrong, you could have students talk with their partner for 1 to 2 minutes about things that could go wrong on a holiday, like I lost my passport, or I got robbed, or just whatever. Or you could say, like, have you had any bad experiences on vacation? What happened? Tell your partner, that kind of thing. Or you could do like that prediction thing, show a headline or a picture, and then have students make predictions, and then they can see if they were true or not. Jennifer, do you have other ideas for setting the context in a reading lesson?
I think also if it's something that you think they may be a little bit familiar with, but not that familiar with, kind of sort of do a little bit of scaffolding, I guess, with, what do you know about this topic? Just to kind of set it up. But yeah, basically it's generating interest and also sort of gearing their mind towards, this is the topic, or this is the point of what we're doing.
Yeah, for sure. Activating their prior knowledge about that topic is key if you want students to retain any sort of new information. It's one of the kind of the hallmarks of like language teaching, students connecting their old information to the new information that they're taking in. All right, and then the next step, you can pre-teach some grammar or vocabulary. I would put this as kind of an optional step. It's not always necessary, but if you're like looking at your reading passage and you're like, oh, this grammatical point is key to understanding, but my students may not be that familiar with it. Or there's these like 5 words that I'm sure my students don't know, then you can take that time to pre-teach some of those things. And so just they're fresh in students' minds when they're doing the reading passage, and they don't have to stop and look it up or ask you what it is. It's like they already will know those things.
Yeah. If you have control over what they're reading and you're looking and seeing that there's more than a small handful of things that would need pre-teaching, then you might want to reevaluate that choice of text. But if you have no choice in your choice of text, then you just have to work with what you've got.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, and then the next one is reading for gist. So that's where skimming and scanning come in. So this is a very, very quick reading. It should be timed, and students just have to read for like one specific task. Maybe finding out like how many people went on the vacation, or like what was the major disaster that happened, or if they made a prediction in the previous steps, then finding out if that prediction was true or not about what the story was about. So push students to read quickly in this stage. That's the key. And then once the time is up, get them to close their books or turn the paper over and the reading time is done. And then quickly go over the answer to whatever task they were given. Quickly is the key. Don't linger on it. And these should kind of be like yes, no questions, not in-depth kind of things.
Yeah, so that's the gist reading. And again, thinking of reading for gist versus reading for detail, your gist activity should be sort of quick, like the way that gisting is quick, but your reading for detail activity should be a bit more detailed, a bit longer.
And then get into the second reading, which is reading for detail. So definitely students will have more time at this stage, and they should actually also have a task to complete, which is usually a set of questions that they'll need to answer dealing with the meaning of the text, or so give more time and then allow them to formulate answers to the questions. And then I would always have them compare answers with a partner before checking answers as a class.
Yes, so a think, pair, share, if you will.
Yes, exactly.
Another one of my favorite activities.
Yes. And then after the second reading, I would often focus on some grammar or vocabulary that was found within the reading. So this is kind of a nice way to introduce new language to students and to push their vocabularies or their grammatical usage. So what do I want to say about that?
I think it's a good way to have them practice their context skills, is to see, like, if you did not pre-teach something, like, were they able to sort of figure it out using the reading? And then, expand on it more to reinforce it.
And at this point, you could actually like launch into a whole lesson on some grammatical concept or some vocabulary set that involves like controlled practice, free practice, that kind of thing, using other skills like speaking or writing skills as well. So it can be like a nice launching point, especially if you have a longer class, like maybe a 90-minute class or something like that. If you have a shorter class, then definitely like the reading can be the focus in itself. But definitely try to focus on some aspect of the language. Reading just to read is not terrible because you're teaching students to like read for detail, reading quickly, skimming, scanning, that kind of thing. But it's even more, you can like level up your helpfulness if you focus on some grammar or vocabulary in that lesson as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I guess, a difference from extensive reading. If you have, I guess, like a purpose-built reading passage or some text, it should hopefully have either some thematic vocabulary or some grammar pattern that is used several times that you can make it easier to focus on, like rather than here's this one grammar point that you see one time in this whole passage.
Yeah, if you get your reading passages out of like ESL textbooks, that will be the case. Like they won't just have random things in there. It'll be like repeated, like hit over the head and kind of repeated things. So it'll be easier for you to like to do that for sure. But yeah, you can also find reading passages online or newspaper articles or whatever for higher level students. And one thing I would just mention for higher level students, it can be worth using authentic materials. So by authentic materials, I mean things that are not designed for ESL, EFL students, but they're just, you know, regular newspaper articles that you would, or magazine articles that you would see in Canada or the US or England or wherever, just for native English speakers. It's a nice way to push students to read at a higher level for sure, because stuff designed for English learners is limited in grammar and vocabulary and doesn't have like the wide range of that kind of stuff. But higher level students need exposure to that higher level stuff with the full range of everything in it.
Yeah, and these days it's so easy. They've got, you know, newspapers from around the world. So if you're specifically only teaching, you know, British English or American English, or, you know, I don't know, if you're in Singapore and you're focusing on English as it's used there, you can get, you know, newspapers that are written in that style, or you can get other authentic text, even, you know, bus schedules from any major city or, you know, whatever.
I can't believe I didn't mention this at the beginning, but breakingnewsenglish.com is the gold mine of ESL reading. So be sure to check it out. There's different levels. Anyway, the person who runs that site takes like authentic newspaper articles and then grades them and then makes all these like really impressive lessons with all these activities
you
surrounding that.
Base your entire lesson off of one of his articles, I think.
I have a few classics that are from his articles that I still use like 10 years later. They're in my Google Drive. And I'm like, oh, that was such a great lesson. And then I like just recycle it over and over. So yeah, have a look there. You'll find some kind of timeless stuff there.
And literally hundreds, if not thousands of articles and multiple activities to go with each article. It's amazing. And he also dictates them. So you can do it as a reading activity, a listening activity, you know, both, whatever. It's such an amazing site.
I almost feel like we should have just said that at the beginning. Go to like breakingnewsenglish.com and then we could have been done with this episode. So that's kind of like your source for all the good things, ESL reading. Definitely. Okay, so after focusing on some grammar or vocabulary, if you have time, you could do some rounding off activity or game. So related to either the topic or the grammar or the vocabulary that you taught. So yeah, just so, or like students can give their opinions about what they read, maybe a class discussion about something or a small group discussion. So just kind of some way to like finish off or to like kind of recap what you've taught.
And it's a good little way to sneak in some writing practice. You could have them work on summarizing, or you could have them write an opinion about it, or, depending on what the original activity or the topic was, you could have them maybe, tell if it was about, terrible things that happen on holiday, and they've discussed it at the beginning of class and then read about it, and then have them, write a little short journal about a real or imaginary terrible holiday that they had, for example.
Or something for that, like maybe you could have some like postcards, blank postcards, and students could go in groups and then pretend, make up some like crazy stories they're writing to their grandma or something about their crazy vacation together and all the bad things that happened or whatever. So there's like a million different kind of rounding off activities you can do. But yeah, definitely you can focus on speaking, like giving opinions or discussion about the topic, or writing. It's a nice way to get some writing practice in as well. Okay, so there are a couple books on Amazon that you might want to check out. So the first one is ESL Reading Activities for Teenagers and Adults. And then the next one is ESL Reading Activities for Kids. So you'll find a ton of good games and activities that will help you focus on reading skills. And then also I have a blog post about that as well, ESL Reading Activities. So I'll put that link down in the show notes for you to check out, which you can find at eslactivity.org. All right, Jennifer, so where can people find you online?
You can find me at teachtravelearn.com or on YouTube, Teach Travel Learn. And where can people find you, Jackie?
Sure. Well, you can find me at eslactivity.org. Lots of good stuff there. And then also just have a search for like Jackie Bolen, Bolen, on Amazon, and you can see all my books there for a variety of teaching situations. All right. So I think that's a good place to end off, Jennifer. Thanks so much for talking ESL reading.
Thank you for all your good tips.
Yes, I try my best, or I do my best. Perfect. All right. So we will talk to everyone next time. Bye.
All right. Bye.